right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Amphitheater Hot Shop here at the Corning Museum of Glass. My name is Eric Goldschmidt. I am the Properties of Glass and Flameworking Program Supervisor. And for our in-house audience, just to let you know, we've got a bunch of cameras around here. We are live streaming the demonstration that I'm going to do for you guys here. This is part of a special series of live streams that we do that we call Bring the Heat, where we feature our own in-house artists and live stream what we make. And what I end up making is actually going to be available for sale in the shops, assuming it works out first quality, which is a big assumption. We don't know that for certain. So I am going to make one of these candlesticks that you see here. And if I have enough time, I'll make one of these tumblers as well. These are a new series of work that I've put out over the last year. So I've done a bit of prep to expedite things. I've already prepared some glass to the right sizes that I need and also kept them warm. So I've got an oven just out of view for our viewers on the web, I think, that is keeping some parts warm for me. Ultimately, when I finish the candlestick, it's going to go in there as well to cool safely. So these candlesticks, I sort of see them in three separate parts. We've got the cylinder on top, the sort of dish section, and then what we call a trumpet foot below that. I'm going to start by making the top, so the cylinder and the dish. So I've got two bubbles prepared. These started as a piece of tubing. So this is my raw material. It starts actually twice this length, so I start just by cutting the tube in half, and then I melt apart whatever portions I need for the different objects I'm going to make. So I've already portioned this out. The next step is to attach these two sections. Now, as I attach these, I have a couple of concerns. The first one is temperature. I want to make sure both pieces of glass are hot enough that they really flow together and make a permanent fuse, a permanent attachment as they touch. I'm judging temperature by watching the glow of the glass. The hotter it is, the brighter it glows. I want this so hot, it's almost white hot as I stick it together. Now, my other concern beyond temperature is form, and particularly the angles at which these parts are coming together, and also the angles on the insides of the tube. I don't want to create sharp, acute angles or even sharp right angles. So just getting this attached, making sure everything's cleanly fused on the outside. But as I make this sort of an attachment, I do create right angles where the two pieces are meeting on the inside. So I'm going to blow in here. As I blow in that side, it causes it to curve instead of being a sharp right angle. Blow on the other side, and that's looking just about right. So now I've got this wider section on my right side. That's going to be the dish. So that's what I'm going to focus on now. And I'll soften the glass up. I have to go through a few steps to turn this into that dish form. The first step is to reshape what is sort of cylindrical into more of a sphere. So I'm going to soften up the glass with the flame, and once it's hot enough, I'll inflate it. To judge temperature, I'm watching the glow of the glass very, very closely. The hotter it is, the brighter it glows. I want a nice uniform medium shade of orange right here, all along the circumference of the tube and all along its length. And that's looking just right there. So I'm going to take it out of the flame, get it under control, and I'll blow in to inflate it. I'm just going to blow very gently, almost like a whisper. And we'll blow a little bit more. Okay, so essentially a sphere if it wasn't attached to the other two parts there. Now I want to make the sphere lower and wider. So to do that, I'll tighten up the flame a little bit. As I soften the glass, now I'm going to gently squeeze my hands closer together and turn a little bit faster. And the combination of the squeezing and then centripetal force from turning faster is going to change the shape, make it lower and wider. There we go. Give a little puff of air to keep that nicely curved. And now the next step is to open up that form. And to open it, I'm going to break the glass. But I want to control the break, where it breaks, how it breaks. To do that, I'm going to create a constriction where I want this to break. Call this a jack line or a neckline. And it's got to be accurate. The constriction needs to be round and centered with the rest of the form. If it's not, I won't get a round level dish to form. So got to be accurate here. And that looks good. The next step to get that to break apart, I'm going to use my diamond shears, which are these guys here. They're called diamond shears because the blades close to a diamond shape. So I'm going to use the shears initially to tighten the constriction a little bit. More importantly, I'm going to be using the metal blades of the shears to cool the glass where they're making contact with it. And they're very narrow blades, so they only contact a little bit of material, which cools it really unevenly. And that creates thermal stress within the glass, a little bit of temperature stress. And with enough thermal stress and then enough of a vibration, we get a nice, clean break. So now there is a round uniform opening on the tip of the bubble here, and I'm going to try to keep that round and uniform as I open it wider. I'll start to use another tool here. We call these a pair of jacks. Very important extension of the glassmaker's hands. And the jacks are made of steel. As steel and most other metals heat up, they tend to stick to molten glass. So I've got a little bit of beeswax over to my right side that I'll keep a coating of that beeswax on the metal blades, and that works as lubrication, and it just keeps the glass sliding on the metal. Okay, so that's open just right. We'll make sure some beeswax is on there. And I'm going to add a lip wrap on here. You might notice on the edge of each bit of hollow form, there's a sort of a complementary band of a slightly different shade of blue. So I'm going to add that now. So I've already pulled down a thicker rod of blue glass. I want it nice and thin for this application. So we tend to call glass when it's thin like this a stringer. And because it's so thin, it's going to soften very quickly as I heat it, and it's going to stiffen very quickly as I stop heating it. So the thinner the glass is, the more accurate you have to be. So I'm actually placing the stringer right on the very end of the tube. And notice I'm just sort of heating off the bottom edge of the flame as I do this. If I put that stringer right in the middle of the flame, it melts too quickly to control it. So for really delicate details, we tend to use the edges of the flame. Now, I should tell you a little more about the flame too. This torch here is running on propane and oxygen. When I turn the gases up as high as they can go, the flame temperature gets up around 4,000 Fahrenheit. Quite a bit cooler at the moment. This is probably closer to 3,000 here. But I'll crank it back up to 4,000 in a moment. So I've gotten that stringer all the way around, so you get a nice even lip wrap. I do need a little more heat now to really fuse that lip wrap to the rest of the bubble here. And one other thing I should point out, you may have noticed as I'm sort of shaping the end of the bubble here, I keep flashing the flame back at the seam where I attach the two bubbles together. I don't want to let that get too cold while I'm still working away on the section here. If that connection gets too cold and then I happen to splash it with the flame, it's very likely to crack. So I'm going to try to just keep that warm until I'm done working on this section of the piece. So you'll notice as I go along now, every once in a while, I just flash a little heat on the seam, and then I focus the heat back where I'm really trying to affect the shape. Now, a 4,000 degree flame, pretty outrageous temperature. But believe it or not, I'm actually perfectly comfortable back here. Now, there's so much oxygen pushing its way through the torch that it really helps to focus the heat. So the heat stays pretty well contained within the flame, and it's getting pushed away from me the whole time as well. So it's a lot more comfortable than it sounds when you hear that crazy temperature. All right, so I've got this open pretty well. I'm going to crank up the firepower a bit more, and I'll start heating inside of the form and outside of it. As this gets softer, centripetal force is going to open it wider and wider. Now I am going to use the jacks to guide it along, make sure the shape stays nice and round, but you can see it's opening up just by turning faster. We'll use the jacks. And now I want to invert the dish over the cylinder a little bit. I'm using gravity to do that. I've got this tilted down towards my hand, and you can see the glass is sort of inverting down over that cylinder. I want to make sure that's straight and perpendicular to the cylinder that's going to hold the candle. So that looks pretty good. So we've got the dish formed. I want to open up the other side now. I need some sort of a handle on this, the dish side. So we're going to go ahead, tighten up the flame a little bit. I'm going to attach a solid rod of clear glass in here. That'll be my handle. And I'll also use some of this clear glass as attachment material when I go to attach this to the trumpet foot. Now, another thing that does tend to surprise folks if they haven't seen flame working before, the way we handle the glass. The fact that we melt the same piece of glass we're holding, and we hold the glass with bare hands as we do this sort of stuff. But glass is actually a very poor conductor of temperature. So it simply won't conduct the heat to where my fingers are, thankfully. I also really need my dexterity for this stuff. So the idea of wearing gloves doesn't work all that well. You just don't have the control you need with gloves on. So thankfully, we really don't need gloves for this stuff. All right, so just building up a little extra thickness of the clear glass. So I'll have a good, stable bit of material to connect this portion to the stem later. And now, once that connection firms up, I can open the other side. So we'll go ahead and switch hands here. And I'll go through pretty much the same order of operations now as to what I went through to open up the dish. I want to set a constriction, then I'll use the diamond shears to set some stress. We'll break it open it a little bit, add the lip wrap. So once again, I do need to be very accurate with the constriction here. Looks pretty good. It's still hot enough that I can get on there with the diamond shears and save myself a reheat. There we go. And once again, flashing heat back at that seam. I didn't have to worry about the seam for a few moments there because I had the dish so hot, and then attaching the clear glass in there, that adds a lot of heat as well. But we'll get that nice and warm. I'm going to open the lip just a little bit, and then I'll add the lip wrap on there. So these are sort of a new product line. I've been working away at tableware over the last couple of years, and if you know my work, you know it tends to revolve around a lot of stemware. Goblets are a very common theme in my work. I do a lot of figurative sculpture as well, but I've sort of been spending a lot of time these last couple of years developing this line of tableware. I really enjoy cooking myself, and my wife and I really enjoy entertaining, so she's been a good motivator for me to develop a nice line of stuff that we like to use at home, and sure enough, it turns out some other folks like to use this stuff as well. So just getting the lip wrap onto the cylinder. trim that so it's nice and neat. Give a little extra heat, then I want to make sure to hit the seam, make sure that's staying happy. And get this better fused on here. Yeah, so as I'm applying the lip wrap, I can't get the tubing hot enough for the lip wrap to completely fuse as I apply it. If I had the tube hot enough for that to really fuse at that moment, it would be moving. And then I'd have a moving target to try to get that little thread of glass onto. So we'll open this to a straight cylinder. And then I like to flare the lip just a little bit as well. So to flare the lip, I just soften the top where I want it to move a little bit. And if I just sort of angle the jacks, the glass will follow that angle. Any extra flames or smoke that you see, that's all just from the beeswax. Glass doesn't combust. As glass gets hotter, it just gets softer, less viscous. All right, so there we go. There we've got the dish and the cylinder ready to go. I want to keep this warm, though, so I'm going to set this back in the oven. The oven is holding at 1060 Fahrenheit. That's hot enough that I can take the glass directly out of the oven and put it right in the 4,000-degree flame without anything cracking. But at 1060, the glass won't soften, so I'm not going to lose the shape or anything while that piece is in the oven. We tend to refer to that as garaging when we use an oven that way. We just sort of park the piece in there so we know it's safe. Okay, so now I want to make the trumpet foot and get it assembled. So I've got another piece of the tubing here. This tubing, if I warm it too quickly, will crack. So to warm it more slowly, I've removed most of the oxygen from the flame. So this flame is closer to about 1500 Fahrenheit as opposed to the 4000 that I was at earlier. So I'm just going to ease the heat in here. We'll let that 1500-degree flame soak in for a moment. And we'll get the oxygen added back in. Reduce the gas a little bit. Now we are back up in that 4,000-degree range with the flame, probably a little bit below. Now the points, these handles that I have, it's crucial that they're really centered with the rest of the tube and that everything turns on the same axis. Typically, after you pull them, they do need some adjusting, and this needs some adjusting here. I'm looking right in this area here, and as I turn the tube, you might notice it sort of wobbles up and down right there. I need to get rid of that wobble. I need everything turning true. If it's not, it's nearly impossible to make anything that's truly straight and round. The glass just doesn't turn uniformly in the flame, so you can't heat it uniformly, and therefore you can't shape it uniformly. So just getting that centered. That looks a lot better. Now, my left side of the tube is going to be the top of the stem. So I'm going to make that a little bit narrower than the right side. To do that, I'm focusing the flame on the left side. And notice my right hand up above my left. That's an indication that I'm using gravity to get the glass to fall from right to left. So let that stretch a bit. And I'll pull a little as well. Okay, so that looks good. It's a little bit narrower on the left side. Now the right side is what I'm going to flare open to be the foot. I want to make sure that's going to be wide enough to properly support the rest of the piece and potentially a lit candle in there as well. So I want to inflate that side, make it a bit wider. So I'll crank up the firepower a little more. And I'll focus the flame now on that right side. And again, I'm going to watch the glow of the glass very closely to judge temperature and viscosity. And I want that sort of medium shade of orange again here. And when I first start blowing, the glass is really hot and soft. So I blow very gently. It's just about as firm as a whisper of air. As I continue blowing, though, the glass is getting colder and stiffer. So I do blow harder and harder. But eventually I get to a point where I'm blowing about as hard as I would to maybe blow out a candle. I never blow any harder than that. If I feel like I need more air pressure at that point, I reheat the glass, soften it up, and blow gently again. All right, that looks good. Now, anytime we want to flare glass wide, we want to set up the bubble so that it is low and wide, just as I did for the dish section. So the area that I'm going to really flare wide is my right side of this bubble that I just inflated. So I'm going to heat that right side and squeeze a little bit. Really makes a big difference setting up the right bubble shape. So any of you at home that are flame workers and you want to make feet, set up a low, wide shape. It's going to make flaring it open a lot easier. Okay, so that looks good. Now I want to stretch the stem. I want to make this nice sort of thin, elegant taper there. So I'm going to focus the flame in the middle of the form here. And once it's soft enough, I'll take the glass out of the flame and I'll pull my hands apart to stretch the stem. The faster I pull, the thinner the stem is going to be. So I've got to sort of time the speed of the pull to get the right length and the right diameter to happen here. That looks pretty good. Now, when I'm making a bunch of these that need to match, I put marks on my bench top. And then as I'm stretching the glass, I just pull until I hit those marks. So if you're wondering how I can repeat process, that is pretty helpful, just having measurements on the bench. I'll also have sets of calipers out if I really need things to match, so I can measure the bubble diameter every step of the way. But for our live stream purposes, I'm not quite so worried about that. All right, so now I want to finish the top of the stem, then I'm going to open up the foot. And part of finishing the stem involves creating a little extra thickness on top that I can use to attach the stem to the dish, or to the thick clear glass that I left on the bottom of the dish. So I'm focusing the flame in the same spot. And as you melt glass, it tries to pull itself together. There's surface tension amongst the atoms, or they're trying to pull together. So as long as I don't pull my hands apart, the glass just continues to pull itself together, and it gets thicker and thicker. And I can see what was a very thin, hollow tube is now getting so thick that the air cavity is about to close up. So I'll just go ahead, peel off the excess. I'm going to fine-tune the shape a little bit, just round that out a little more. And as I pull the point off the end of the tube, the inside wall comes to sort of a sharp triangle. I want it a little more curved, so I'm going to go ahead and give a little puff of air in there to try to round out the shape on the inside of the tube. The glass will be much stronger that way, having a curve rather than having it come up to a sharp point. Okay, that looks good. So I do need a handle on the end so I can open this thing up. So I'll use another rod of clear glass as the handle for this. And of course, as I attach this handle, I want it to be centered so everything continues to turn true here. All right, now, as that firms up, I'm going to open the other side just as I did for the dish and the cylinder. I'm going to set a constriction. I'll use the diamond shears. So again, I've got to be accurate here. So just working with blue glass for this demo here. But I do make these pieces in a variety of pretty cool colors. For you folks that are in-house here, you can see the pieces that are on the light box that are sort of over to my left. Oh, maybe we can pop those on the camera too. So those are the different colors these are available in. And again, this candlestick I'm working on right here, this is a really cool sort of partnership that we do with the shops, where our hot glass team does these bring the heat demonstrations, and the shops are nice enough to sell what we make if it comes out looking right. So setting stress here. And it pops off. And for any of you flame workers at home who are wondering why I chose blue as opposed to any of those other colors, blue is the friendliest of these particular colored glasses that I use for these. Amber is really difficult to work with. The green is pretty friendly. The gray is pretty friendly as well. But the blue seems to be the friendliest, and let's face it, everybody loves blue glass. All right, so I've opened that up. I'm going to add the lip wrap on there as well, so everything corresponds. So again, I have to work off the edge of the flame here. And sometimes the depth perception gets a little tricky, especially as I get older. So I'm actually using the flame a little bit to help with the depth perception. I'm sort of heating a little ahead of where I'm applying the stringer, just to get that glass to glow a little bit. And that really is helpful to see it that much better, really know exactly where I'm laying that stringer. I want to be accurate. If it's not a clean lip wrap, it's very hard to keep the foot round. Alrighty. So, a little more heat, we'll get that fused. And I want to make sure the lip is staying nice and crisp and straight. Going to need this graphite plate in a moment here to make sure this stands properly. So just getting that in the right spot. All right, so now that the lip wrap's fused, we'll start really opening this more aggressively with the jacks. Another nice thing about this blue tubing, you can really see where the heat is and where it isn't. So you can tell where I'm trying to apply the most intense heat to get certain shapes to happen. got that open nice and cleanly, so crank up the firepower a bit more. And just as I did with the dish, I'll start heating inside of the form and outside of it. As it softens, I'm going to turn faster, use centripetal force to open this. I will guide it with the jacks to make sure it stays nice and round. And I want to make sure this is going to stand properly, that it's straight and stable. So we're going to check that right on this graphite plate here. Get right down with it to make sure it's really nice and straight. Yeah, that feels pretty good. All right, so now time to get this thing assembled. So I've got a claw holder here so that I can hold the foot comfortably. Now, I haven't applied any heat to the top of the stem in a few minutes. If I throw this right in that 4,000 degree flame, it will very likely crack. And this is a pretty temperamental part of the process here. Typically, when I'm making a bunch of these, I would put this back in the oven and let the oven heat that area up very slowly and gently. Don't really have that option at the moment. So, my best bet is to warm it gently with the flame. Think happy thoughts. There is always a chance this could crack as I warm in here. Because it's so much thicker there, it is more sensitive to thermal shock. As glass is heated, it swells a little bit. As it cools, it shrinks a little bit. So if it gets heated or cooled too unevenly, different areas expand and contract at such different rates, they pull apart and they crack. We call that thermal shock. We are always thinking about that as we work with glass. The thicker the glass is, the more likely the temperature is going to vary from the surface to the core. It takes time for the heat to penetrate to the core from the surface. So the thicker spot here is more sensitive. Now, the moment of truth. They're going to crank on the oxygen, and I think we're doing okay here. Yep, we are. Good. So, we'll go ahead and melt that apart. I have been practicing these as demos over the last week or so, just to get more and more comfortable talking as I make these, and I did have a couple crack during those demos, so I've learned to take a little extra time with that reheat there. Okay. So that is good to go. We'll set that guy down, and we'll go get the other section out of the oven. And we'll get these assembled. Now you may have noticed I do warm up the tips of the claw holder. I don't want to grab warm glass with cold metal. If I do, there's always a chance that could shock the glass and cause it to crack. So when the glass is between maybe 1,500 and 300 or so Fahrenheit, it's really sensitive to those temperature changes. Even just the touch of cold metal could be enough to crack it. When you're out of that temperature range, the glass is not likely to be so heavily affected by the touch of metal. Okay, so let's get these attached and see what we have for our finished candlestick. Now for this attachment, again, I'm watching the glow of the glass. I want the glass white hot for this attachment. So it'll really flow together. When it looks white hot, it's almost 3,000 Fahrenheit. It's about as soft as honey, so the glass flows right together at that temperature. Get a nice, permanent attachment. And I want to make sure this stays nice and straight as well. So we'll go up vertical with it here. Just sort of eyeing it top to bottom and all around the circumference. And it looks pretty straight, but the only way to know for sure is to check it on a level surface. So we'll go ahead, get the claw holder off of the foot, get right down here with it. Alrighty, yeah, that looks pretty good. So there we go. There we have our candlestick. So the next step, I do need to make sure this cools slowly and evenly. So I'm going to set it back in the oven. And looks like we have enough time to make one of these tumblers too. So we get this safely into the oven. And I've got some material prepped for the tumbler in here as well. Alrighty. Thank you. Thanks. All right, so we get that part of the mission accomplished. Now, one of these tumblers. So I just want to clean this off. The bricks on the inside of the oven are very soft. They're great insulators, but they're soft and they leave little bits of dust on the glass. So just getting that off of there. So I want to join these two. We'll have blue on the bottom, clear on the top. So make sure that end is closed so it'll hold air pressure as I blow in. And I'm just going to attach, they're both open. I'm going to attach the openings and then shape this into one of those tumblers. Now this technique of attaching a couple of bubbles together or multiple bubbles together to create pattern, it's a technique that Italian glass blowers would refer to as incalmo. It became very, very popular back in the 1950s and 60s in Italian glass design, and still very popular today all around the world. And this is just a very simple version of an incalmo. I'm just attaching two sections of glass, very simple pattern work. There are times that people might put together a dozen different sections with different patterning on them. Okay, so I've got these really well attached, but the tendency when you make that sort of an attachment is that the seam is thicker than the rest of the walls. So now I'm going to give a good firm puff of air to stretch out that extra thickness. Looks good. We're nice and clean and straight. So now I'll start shaping the blue section. So we'll focus the flame over here. And I'm going to blow this blue section out into more or less a sphere, because it's going to be a low squat shape. You can see sort of the bottom of the tumblers is kind of that low, wide squat shape. So for things that are low and wide, I want to start with a sphere, and then I'll reheat and make it lower and wider, as I've been doing with the dish form and the foot for the candlestick. So as the glass is softening, I am gently squeezing my hands closer together, trying to sort of condense and compact that form a little bit. And that's looking pretty good, so we'll go ahead and inflate this. Trying to get that point back on center. That looks good. We'll do a little bit of centering here before I move any further. At this point, just got a little bit off. Okay, that feels better. So now I'll start to shape the clear section. The clear section is going to be sort of longer. So rather than inflating that into a sphere, I'm going to shoot for more of a longer, almost like a football shape. So we'll soften up the clear and inflate that. I'm always, as I develop forms, I'm always thinking of what bubble form makes the most sense for the finished cup. So like the bottom of these tumblers I know is going to be a squat form, so I want to start that as a sphere. Something that I know is going to wind up longer, I might as well keep it a little longer, so hence the clear section I blow out into more of a football shape. Okay, that looks pretty good. I want to get rid of a little bit of this waistline in here where it sort of tightens in the center. So focus the flame in there. I'm just sort of heating the clear side and the blue side and the clear and the blue. And as I go back and forth, it's applying a good bit of heat in the middle as well. So that glass is trying to flow together. Give a little puff in here. All right, now I'm going to soften up the blue side again, squeeze and turn fast to make it more of that squat form. It's looking pretty clean. Now I want to create a flat spot on the bottom. Then I'll go ahead and open up the top. So I've tightened up the flame a little bit. I'm going to focus the heat where I want to form the bottom. And then I'll use the graphite L-marver on top of my torch to help shape the bottom. My first move as the glass hits the L-marver is to press downwards a little bit, trying to narrow the diameter of the point where it meets the bottom. Now I'm pushing from right to left to create the flat spot. So now that's set up just right. The next move is to open the top. I'm going to open the top of this differently than the way I opened those other bubbles for the candlesticks. I'm not adding a lip wrap, so I'm okay with having the opening wider when I initially open this. So I'm going to do what's called a flame cut. And I do sort of my own sneaky little version of a flame cut. I've set a very sharp, hot flame here. I'm going to focus the flame where I want this to cut. It's a very narrow flame, so it's only going to soften a very narrow band of material. As it does, I'm going to pull my hands further and further apart. That's going to make that glass thinner and thinner. All the while, as I'm heating the glass, the air inside of the tube is heating up, And as you heat air, it wants to expand. So once I get this thin enough, I'm going to fold the tube over itself, trap the air pressure. It's going to build up and pop the bubble open. So now it's open. I want to make sure that lip is nice and crisp and clean here. So we use the paddle to clean that up. And I want to flare the lip a little bit, so get the jacks ready for that. And we'll just get this so it aligns with the rest of the form. So that's looking pretty good. Now I just need to remove the handle from the bottom. So grab my claw holder so I can grip the lip. Yeah, so these pieces will be available through the shops, assuming they anneal properly. So you can go out to our shops here to make a purchase. You can purchase things online through shops.cmog.org. And these pieces, they're going to put them up on the shop's Instagram once they are ready to be sold. So keep an eye on the shop's Instagram page. So I'm just removing the point here. Also trying to read my talking points. Oh, yeah, so the shop's Instagram and Facebook pages. They'll post some pictures when these are out of the oven and ready to be sold. And of course, if you're curious about other work of mine for sale or any other objects that you see our artists make during Bring the Heats, they are available in the shops. So just making sure that's nice and straight and stable. That looks good. All right, so this also needs to anneal. So I'm going to pop this into the oven. I'll warm up the tweezers a little bit so I can hold it safely. All right, well, thank you guys. So, just a little bit more about these Bring the Heat. So, the whole idea of this Bring the Heat is that it shines a spotlight on our expert glassmakers here and our hot glass team, and really sort of gives us a chance to show off a little more of the creativity that we put into our work that isn't always demonstrated here at the museum. It's a great opportunity for us to feature this partnership we have with the shops as well. And we're going to have 3 more of these through the rest of the summer. So August 1st, Michael Beam is going to be in here. He is one of our furnace glass blowers. On August 22nd, Katie Hubbs will be here doing her Bring the Heat. And then the last one of the season is going to be September 5th. That's going to be Jesse Rassid. So more opportunities for these Bring the Heat demonstrations. Those of you at home, hopefully you'll tune in for those as well. And you guys here, that's another opportunity to see some great glass making on our YouTube channel. So thank you all for joining us in-house. Thank you guys for watching at home. And yeah, we'll see you next time at the Corning Museum of Glass. Thank you very much. Eric Goldschmidt. Massachusetts.